Hello and welcome back to Dark Tower YouTube, where we're doing a deep psychological dive into Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am your host, and we're here to talk about The Gunslinger, Chapter 5, The Gunslinger and the Man in Black. I'm so glad that you're here with me. We made it. This is the end of the book. Is this anything at all like what you expected it to be? The first time I read this book, I know I was thinking about, wow, we have a gunslinger and we've seen him shoot only once in this book when we watched him through flashback massacre the town of Tull. That was really the only gun battle in the Gunslinger. So we're expecting some kind of showdown between the wizard and the gunfighter, right? Nope. How about the wizard gives us this lengthy metaphysical exposition and a vision of the first story of creation from Genesis and a tarot reading. Okay, yeah, sure, absolutely. I love it. This is my favorite chapter ever. It's so great. And I really would love to be there with these men, sitting around a campfire, pulling tarot cards, talking shit about life, the universe, and everything. And if you know me, then you know that's exactly how I spend my free time. So I love it. As cool as it is, though, it doesn't tell us too much about what's going on in the story. It's not super relevant. It's kind of meaningless if you stop and think about it. The tarot reading is a kind of a repeat of what the oracle said to Roland, almost word for word in some parts. And when we got that prophecy from the oracle, we were like, okay, I guess that's gonna happen maybe, and we'll see if it does. It didn't really help us in any practical way. And this tarot reading doesn't super help us. The Man in Black doesn't really know what's going on, we learn in this chapter. He's not the real bad guy, we learn. He is saying things that he's like, I don't know what that meant. I don't know where this card goes. I don't know. So is this worth it? Did we really need to sacrifice Jake to have this conversation? What did we gain? Go to the ocean. You're going to go west to the ocean. You're going to draw 3. Well, who's not going to go to the ocean after they go through the desert and through the mountains? Like, we're going to the beach, duh. And we already knew we're going to draw 3, whatever that means. So once again, I don't know how much we have gained here, and I think it makes us kind of sit with Roland's decision to sacrifice Jake, and maybe makes him sit with that decision a little bit. This is cool and fun, but it's not worth not having Jake here with us. Let's get into it. I'm going to do my best. This is a crazy chapter. I'm going to do my best to just pull some things out that I think are related to what we've been talking about, and maybe help us ask some questions about what's going to come for the rest of the series. First, let's talk about the Golgotha. So the Man in Black and Roland are going to sit and palaver in the Golgotha. Golgotha is a biblical term. No surprises here anymore. This is the place of the skull. That's what that means. It's found in each of the 4 Gospels in the Bible. Jesus was crucified at Golgotha, the place of the skull. So that's what this meeting place is, directly linking this to Christ's crucifixion and death. And it is a boneyard. It's scattered with all kinds of dry, dusty bones. So they're going to talk in the Golgotha. It's daylight, so when Jake and the gunslinger are coming out of the mountain, they can see the daylight, and Roland leaps over and he pulls himself up into the reality of a new Ka, we were told. But it's not light for long. So I feel like, just like at the end of chapter 3, where Roland uncouples, or so he was saying, from Jake, the darkness swallowed them, is what happens right after that. And here, as soon as Roland actually goes through with that uncoupling, even though we're still seeing him not forgetting about Jake, not putting him out of his mind at all. And we continue to get that through this chapter. When he goes through with that decision, though, he is into the light for a few moments only. And then the dark descends and it stays there this whole chapter. And this night goes on and on and on and on. It's a magical dark night, is what the man in black says. The king of the darkness has made this night go on as long as it needs to go on to have this conversation. So, long, dark, cold night. And the first thing that the man in black is talking about is telling Roland to go get some wood for the fire. King writes, "The shadowed lips twitched in a smile. Gather wood, Gunslinger. This side of the mountain is gentle, but at this altitude, the cold still may put a knife in one's belly. And this is a place of death, eh?" "I'll kill you," the gunslinger said. "No, you won't. You can't. But you can gather wood to remember your Isaac." The gunslinger had no understanding of the reference. I want to pull a few things out of this little piece. You won't kill me, you can't. And we've seen Roland try to shoot this guy and it doesn't work. So there's some truth here, but what does it mean? You can't kill me. Not sure, but we're asking some questions about these two. You can gather wood to remember your Isaac. And the gunslinger's like, I have no idea. And yet, we've been given biblical story after biblical story after biblical story in this story. We saw Sylvia Pittston just running off these famous Bible stories so that we're like, oh yeah, the Bible as we know it definitely exists here. We had Roland asking Jake, do you know about the Bible? Oh yeah, well my place of Gilead is named after it, or New Canaan, it's named after the Bible. So it's really weird that he doesn't know the story of Isaac. For those of you who don't know, Isaac was the son of Abraham, and Abraham was one of the big father figures in the Bible, in the Jewish tradition, and in the Old Testament. And he is told by God to sacrifice his son. And there's some kind of gathering of wood. He's going to bind up his child, the boy, and take him up onto the mountain and sacrifice him to God. And Abraham is like, okay, and he does all of these things and goes to kill his kid. And at the last minute, the angel appears to him and says, no, just kidding. We were just checking that you were going to do what God told you to do. And Abraham was like, oh, thanks. Sorry, kid. I guess I'll not kill you now. There are stories even in Christianity and Judaism and Islam where he does kill his son. Some people say, oh no, he definitely killed him. There are some traditions where Isaac wanted to be killed and said, I want to be a sacrifice for God. So I found that interesting when I was digging around a little bit. But the main story is he doesn't go through with the sacrifice of the boy. So we can see some parallels to Roland's story here, with that important difference of Roland did go through with the sacrifice of his boy and Abraham did not. And why doesn't Roland know about this story? So either it's in their Bible and the gunslingers weren't taught it or didn't read it, because we might have to sacrifice some things on the road to the tower. So we don't want these gunslingers to know this story? Or did he learn it and just forget about it? Or what? He repressed it because it's too close to home? Not sure, but just a very wild, weird little bit there that Roland has no idea about that particular story that's so relevant to his life and what he has going on. They are going to sit down, and Roland is told to make a fire, cook dinner. He has to cook the man in black's rabbit. Interestingly, they do not share water. So I thought that was a nice touch. We remember when Roland met Jake. Jake saved Roland's life by giving him water, and then a few days later, Roland is giving Jake water, and we have that idea of Kef, the sharing of water, the sharing of minds that we saw happening between the Gunslinger and Jake. There's no sharing of water here. So I like that. I like that we haven't gone too far down that path of turning into the thing that you are hating, Roland. At the very beginning of this book, it was that idea of, if I become the thing that I'm pursuing, then what good is all of this? I don't want to be that person that I'm considering the bad guy. I don't want to become him. He's directly compared to the man in black, though. King tells us that he gives us a description of the man in black. King writes, his hair was black and of a ragged, matted length. His forehead was high, his eyes dark and brilliant. His nose was nondescript. The lips were full and sensual. His complexion was pallid, as was the gunslinger's own. So directly pulling them together there. And King continues, the gunslinger said finally, I expected an older man. Why? I am nearly immortal, as are you, Roland, for now, at least. I could have taken a face with which you would have been more familiar, but I elected to show you the one I was born with. I am nearly immortal, as are you for now. So they're the same in that way if we're believing what the man in black is telling us, which is, I don't know, can we believe this guy? But King there drawing that direct comparison between their complexions, which is telling us they're similar in some way, not too similar. We know the black hair, which by the end of the story, Roland's has gone a little bit gray. We don't talk about the blue eyes here of the man in black, but remember back in Tull when Allie was hypnotized by those blue eyes? So they have the same color eyes, same complexion. So I'm paying attention to that. And Roland was talking about he had become the boy had become him. Is he becoming the thing that he pursued by this choice that he made? Things to think about. No answers there. We're going to move into the tarot reading portion of this chapter. And the man in black has a tarot deck, which is a mix of the standard tarot deck, which I have here so I can show you some of the cards that are talked about in this reading. And then the man in black made his own tarot cards. So some of them I don't have pictures of because I haven't created them yet. Has anybody created these cards? Anybody that I ever talk to when we talk about this chapter in the tarot reading is like, I need those cards that the man in black has. And I guess I need to make them because I've never seen them. If you know about them, please tell me. But he's going to pull cards for the Gunslinger now. The first card is a card that's found in the traditional tarot deck. Oh, it's blurry. There you go. This is the Hanged Man, and this card is not signifying death but strength, is what the man in black says about that card. In the traditional tarot reading, this is a good card. It's not bad. This man has put himself up into that hanging position. He can get down when he wants to, but he's taking some time. He's hanging out, literally. He's seeing things from a different perspective. There is a halo around his head from pausing, reconsidering. He's becoming enlightened through this experience. So this is a card that just says, you're all right, just hang out for a minute. Try to see things differently and see if that changes what's going on with you. Well, wouldn't we have loved Roland to do that? Wait then. Wait a while is that little voice at the end that he ignored. That's exactly the energy of this card. So that's signifying Roland in the Man in Black's tarot reading. The second card is the Sailor, and this is not a card in the traditional deck, which, by the way, is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and my cards are the Art Nouveau version of that, so they're a little different than the original illustrations, but pretty close. But the Sailor doesn't exist in the tarot deck. This is a card where there is a boy drowning out away from the boat, and he has I think he's a little blonde kid. King writes, "He drowns, Gunslinger, and no one throws out the line. The boy, Jake." The Gunslinger winced, said nothing. So that's Jake. That happened. That's not fortune telling. We know that that's what just happened. The third card is a baboon sitting astride a young man's shoulders, and the Man in Black refers to him as the prisoner. He says, "A trifle upsetting, isn't he?" the Man in Black said, and seemed on the verge of sniggering. That is hearkening back to what the Oracle told us about the demon infesting him named Heroin, so the monkey on his back. Okay, we get it. Card number 4 is not a traditional tarot card, a two-faced looking woman sitting at a spinning wheel that the Man in Black calls the Lady of Shadows, and the Oracle said, "She comes on wheels, I see no more." So we have a spinning wheels here now, and she has two different faces on the card. King writes, "Does she look two-faced to you, Gunslinger?" She is. 2 faces, at least. She broke the blue plate. What do you mean? I don't know. And in this case, at least, the Gunslinger thought his adversary was telling the truth. So here's our first real glimpse that the Man in Black doesn't know what's really happening. There's things coming through him, which can happen in a tarot reading. If you are into the world of tarot at all, then a great tarot reader will be able to kind of have things move through and say, "I'm thinking of dolphins," and then you're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going swimming with the dolphins tomorrow," stuff like that. So maybe just a little psychic flash there from the Man in Black, but not helpful for anybody because he doesn't know what it means. So that's that. The next card is Death. King writes, "Death," the Man in Black said simply, "yet not for you." The Death card is a skeleton who is marching through on his horse, just trampling people left and right. The card that the Man in Black has is a little different, but it's still a Grim Reaper type figure with it holding a scythe. And death in the traditional tarot doesn't mean physical death necessarily, but psychological death, spiritual death, getting rid of something old to move into the new. There needs to be death before there can be rebirth. So we have that feeling going on, and we did just lose Jake. Death. Is this death? Is it? And we're drawing that card, so feels related to me. A lot of change has just happened very suddenly, and bringing us into something new that we don't know what that is yet. Yet not for you is what the man in black tells him. So we don't know what that means. Card number 6. King writes, the gunslinger looked at it and felt a strange, crawling anticipation in his guts. The feeling was mixed with horror and joy, and the whole of the emotion was unnameable. It made him feel like throwing up and dancing at the same time. The tower, the man in black said softly. Here is the tower. There is a tower in traditional tarot. It's not a great card when you see it, and it is a dark tower. It is a sign of forced change that's probably going to look and feel kind of destructive and chaotic as it's happening. It has to happen. You don't have any choice. You're going to be kicked in your butt into a new situation, and you're going to feel like this is bad. The tower's on fire. We're falling from the sky down onto the rocks below. Interesting thing about this card, if you're into tarot, is that the one woman here, even though she's falling from this burning tower, keeps her crown on. So she's able to kind of keep it together amidst the swirling chaos of destruction of the tower. So that's what that is. And in this reading that the man in black is giving, he takes the tower and he places it over the hanged man. And Roland's like, what does that mean? And the man in black doesn't answer him. And Roland's like, tell me what it means. And man in black is not giving up any answers there. But I find it kind of funny because we know what it means. You could have slowed down, stopped, reconsidered, see Jake differently, see your position differently, get some enlightenment. But no, the temptation of the tower, boom, just overrode your better nature. And now here we are. What does it mean? We don't know, but that's what that looks like to me in the reading. That's the feeling that I get from it. Card number 7 is a sun rising in a blue sky with cupids and sprites all around it. And there's a great red field. King writes, roses or blood? The gunslinger could not tell. Perhaps, he thought, it's both. The 7th card is life, the man in black said softly. But not for you. Where does it fit the pattern? That is not for you to know now, the man in black said, or for me to know. I am not the great one you seek, only his emissary. He flipped the card carelessly into the dying fire. It charred, curled, and flashed to flame. The gunslinger felt his heart quail and turn icy in his chest. Sleep now, the man in black said carelessly, perchance to dream and that sort of thing. So we don't have a life card, but we do have a sun card, which is a very similar feeling here. Obviously, King knows about the traditional tarot deck because he's using them in this story. And so I feel like there just might have been some, this is what I'm going for, but I need it to suit my plot a little bit better. So we have the sun rising in the sun card, and there's this cherubic little baby figure on the card on a white horse, which the white is always signifying some kind of spiritual leveling up. We do have some red in this card, and there are flowers. They're sunflowers. They're not roses or blood, but it's a similar vibe. And of course, the sun is life. This is the best card in the deck. If you have a traditional tarot reading and you see this card, you're doing great, or things are going to be turning around for you very soon into wonderful, life-giving moments. So Roland gets this card, but it doesn't go down in the reading. And the man in black's like, I don't know, and chucks it into the fire. Life, but not for you. So that doesn't feel good, and it doesn't feel good to Roland, whose heart is having a little palpitation there. And we wonder, not for you. Death, but not for you. Life, but not for you. It's Roland's reading, so who is it for then? No answers, just more questions from this tarot reading. And then, of course, the man in black with his Shakespearean quote. To sleep, perchance to dream, is Hamlet considering committing suicide because his life has kind of gone down the pot, and he's nervous, though, about what's going to happen if he does. So sleep being compared to death in Hamlet. And here, sleep perchance to dream. In Hamlet, those are dreams of heaven or hell. What is going to happen to my consciousness when I die? So using that here feels big, and feels like maybe not too much of a surprise when we get the vision that we get. Sleep being compared to death. We've been talking a lot about death. We just drew the death card, so a lot of thematically related things happening here. So let's take stock of that tarot reading quickly. What have we learned from that spread? We learned, okay, the 3 people that he's going to meet, or these things that he's going to encounter. The prisoner, the lady of shadows, we're guessing, and then death, but not for you. That's what the oracle said too? Not super helpful. And then the rest of this reading was like, not super helpful. So kind of just reflecting back to us some things that we already knew, and then giving us some vague questions about what's to come. Not the best tarot reading. Roland kind of leaps at the man in black, maybe because that tarot reading was so terrible. He thinks he's going to kill him, but you can't kill him, Roland, for whatever reason. You're both nearly immortal, whatever that means. And instead of, he says, I'm going to kill you with my hands if I can't kill you with my guns. But instead he falls into this deep sleep before he can get there. And this is where we move into the next part of the chapter, which is the man in black giving us his version of the first creation story of Genesis. So more biblical references. This is such a biblically laden work of fiction. It's really cool, and I'm glad you guys are here to see it and talk about it. King writes, "Let's have a little light," the voice of the man in black said nonchalantly. And there was light. The gunslinger thought in a detached way that light was pretty good. The man in black shows us the creation of the stars. We're told that Roland doesn't recognize these constellations. He creates land, plants, water, animals. Now bring man. But curiously, instead of a picture of man or the Garden of Eden, we don't get that. We get Roland experiencing a feeling of falling upwards and being pulled away from the earth so quickly that he's seeing the earth speed away and it starts to curve. And King writes, "Yes, they had all said it curved. His teacher Venet had claimed it had been proven long before the world had moved on." So definitely some flat earthers in Roland's day. Vanet, that we've heard his name a few times. This is a name that means quick-minded, versatile, and expressive. I couldn't find a lot on the name Vanet, so I don't have too much more to say about it, except quick-minded, versatile, and expressive. It's a pretty good fit for not knowing much more about Vanet or the origin of that name. But he knew that the world was round, which was a little more controversial than it is today, I guess. He keeps zooming out and he starts to see the sun emerging, rising from behind the earth. King writes, "Let there be light!" The voice no longer belonged to the man in black. It was gigantic, echoing. It filled space and the spaces between space. It no longer belonged to the man in black, that voice. Wow, well, who does it belong to then? Don't know. He keeps zooming out past planets that we recognize. Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. They get past Pluto. And then there's a black that is darker than dark. Blacker than black. And here is where Roland starts to lose it. And just remember these themes of light and darkness that we've been picking up on the last few chapters of the story. We're getting more and more of that imagery. And now it is blacker than black, the darkest that you can get and the most light that you can get here. King writes, "No more. Please, no more now. No more. Light! No more! No more, please!" The stars themselves began to shrink. Whole nebulae drew together and became glowing smudges. The whole universe seemed to be drawing around him. "Please, no more, no more, no more." The voice of the man in black whispered silkily into his ear. "Then renege. Cast away all thoughts of the tower. Go your way, Gunslinger, and begin the long job of saving your soul." He gathered himself, shaken and alone and wrapped in the darkness, terrified of an ultimate meaning rushing at him. He gathered himself and uttered the final answer on that subject. "Never." Then, "Let there be light." And there does come a great light. It is so big that Roland cannot remain conscious in the face of that light, and he needs to begin retreating and shutting down and dissociating from it. Before he does, before he passes out completely, he sees something clearly, and he grabs onto it mentally because he believes it is of cosmic importance. To end this section, King writes, "He fled the light and the knowledge the light implied, and so came back to himself. Even so do the rest of us, even so the best of us." What an interesting way to end that section. Fleeing the light and everything that the light implied. Everybody does this, he says. Even the best of us can't stand up to that ultimate knowledge. And this brings up a lot of spiritual and religious imagery, but that idea that you cannot see God and live. You cannot endure the light that is the ultimate source, the one source, the one force, however you want to talk about God, the universe, the source. It's unimaginably huge. It's infinity. It's all the light that you can imagine that would destroy you if you stayed and looked at it. So that's what this feels like to me. And those of us who want to get there, even the best of us retreat away from that. because it's so big that our little human minds might just explode. Isn't it interesting that the man in black is the one who's giving this vision of ultimate light to our protagonist? The darkest man is the one who's giving the image of the lightest light. I don't know what it means, but it's definitely thematically related in terms of the contrast of these things and what is good and what is evil and what is light and what is dark and who is who, and are we all made up of both when we're making some bad decisions or blaming other people? And how do we get back to the light? How do we save our souls? And here's that talk of soul again, where the man in black gives the same choice that the oracle gave. You can go back. You don't have to do this. But the man in black involves Roland's soul and says, go about the long job of saving your soul, which we might agree is exactly what Roland needs to be doing now. So is the man in black giving him good advice here? Is the man in black a real true baddie? So many questions, no answers, but he's kind of helping the gunslinger here with that suggestion. But of course, our friend Roland is like, never gonna save my soul. And we're like, well, I hope you try, because maybe this story won't be as interesting if you're just going totally to the dark side. I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen here. We'll have to find out. The man in black reveals that he is Martin at some point in here. And I want to say that if you're feeling a little confused by Martin Walter, you're in good company, and this is something that King himself was confused about. If you are reading the unrevised edition, you're like, what are you even talking about? Because it's a different setup. And in the original version of the Gunslinger, Martin is killed, I believe, by the Gunslingers. So he's dead. So when the man in black reveals himself as Martin, Roland should be like, oh, we killed you. But that doesn't happen. And we know from Stephen King that he wasn't quite sure what was happening with these characters. So when he progressed through the book with his characters, which is how he writes, which I love, he figured out this was all the same person. He was showing up in different forms to Roland at different points in his life, but it was the same dude. It was that same dark energy, this chaotic, goading, poking him with a stick, seemingly trying to mess him up, but it's unclear really. But that's Martin is Walter is the man in black. So that's what we're coming to in the revised edition of the Gunslinger. He says, I'm not the one that you seek, I'm his emissary. And we learn more about that he is working for the Red-Handed King, which makes us think of Sylvia Pittston and the Crimson King. Coincidence? I mean, probably not, but we'll have to see. But that's who is apparently in charge of the Dark Tower now. This Red-Handed King, the big baddie. The man in black is not the big baddie. He works for him, and he's got hold of the Dark Tower now. And now we're thinking about, when Roland says, my father was the last Lord of the Light. We need the Lord of the Light to fight the Lord of the Darkness. And again, I think that's you, Roland, even though you're saying he was the last. We don't know. I told you it's going to be a lot of cool things that we're learning, but it doesn't help us too much and gives us more questions than we started out this chapter with. We also learned that the man in black has no idea what Roland saw at the end of that vision. And it turns out to be a blade of grass, but it's purple. My 15-year-old son read this book and he liked it and he's continuing to read on. But at the end of this, he said, I don't understand. I'm confused. What is the purple blade of grass, Mom? And I said, we don't have an answer to that. You're supposed to be wondering what that is. We do get the idea of size. So we move into this mind-blowing metaphysical and physical exposition about how the tower is encompassing size. So life is encompassing size, and the tower is encompassing size is encompassing life, and the tower is encompassing size. Some really big ideas. And he does talk about a blade of grass and how, what if our universe is just a little tiny atom on a blade of grass? So we have that grass imagery again, not answering too many questions. He is going to tell us about the mysteries of the universe, though. We get some history about the people who came before, generations before the world had moved on. There was a company called North Central Positronics, and I believe this is only in the revised edition. We'll remember that North Central Positronics was stamped onto that atomic water slug back at the way station. But these were the people who were shining the false light of science, according to the Man in Black, and it destroyed them. So technology was coming on strong. They cured cancer. They almost conquered aging. They walked on the moon. And Roland's like, no, they didn't. So we have some moon conspiracy theorists as well. Roland is one of them. All in all, we're not getting a great picture of science here. It was their undoing. The Man in Black's not a big fan of this. It's not shown in a great light, science. So this idea of the intellect of man progressing and getting smarter and smarter and smarter intellectually, but perhaps not emotionally, just to try and tie it into the theme of Roland not being able to process his emotions, get in touch with his emotions. He's a very sharp person. I mean, they keep saying, he's slow, he's not good at his studies. Well, he did well enough to make it to be the last gunslinger. So even though he wasn't as smart as Jamie and he's not as quick as Cuthbert, those people are all dead though. And Roland knows some things. He knows some things. He remembers these lessons. He talked about the gas in the subway station. He knew about the flat earthers were wrong. So I don't know. He's not as dumb as all of that. So he does have some intellectual prowess to get him as far as he's come. Emotionally is where he has some stickiness, I would say. And perhaps this is comparing those things, or we're going to say, is there some kind of substance there to the world collapsing and moving on, and Roland moving on into something worse because of the lack of his emotional body being able to decide not to drop Jake. So more talk of the soul in this exposition. King writes, few, if any, seem to have grasped the truest principle of reality. New knowledge leads always to yet more awesome mysteries. Greater physiological knowledge of the brain makes the existence of the soul less possible, yet more probable by the nature of the search. Do you see? Of course you don't. You've reached the limits of your ability to comprehend. But never mind. That's besides the point. What is the point, then? The greatest mystery the universe offers is not life, but size. Size encompasses life, and the tower encompasses size. So the point is not about the search for the soul, according to the man in black, although he just did tell Roland you should go save your soul. So a lot of talk about the soul, though, hey? The greatest mystery the universe offers is not life, but size. And that we're going to get a whole big exposition about this that I was talking about, and I'll pull some things out of it. I like the idea of the greater physiological knowledge of the brain makes the existence of the soul less possible yet more probable by nature of the search. Wow. We're looking for the soul. We're looking for the seat of our conscious mind, the part that makes us aware. Where is our awareness? Our soul, our conscious mind, our imagination. Where does that live? We're intellectually, we can start dissecting the brain and doing brain surgery, and again, this idea of like intellectual prowess, but it doesn't get us anywhere. And this argument that the more that we look, less possible that we're going to find it like in a spot in the brain. Oh, there's consciousness, but more probable because we're looking for it, because we're seeking, we're searching, we want to know who we are more than just this physical body. So can you relate? Where are you at in your religious, agnostic, spiritual, atheistic viewpoints? And regardless, what do you think about consciousness? Where does it live? What is it? What does it mean? How does awareness even work? How does your soul even soul, bro? So back to this idea of size encompassing life and the tower encompassing size. And he's talking about the fish that lives in his universe under the waves, and he gets pulled out into this totally weird other universe where he can't breathe and he's probably going to get eaten for dinner. He's talking about how nothing is really solid. And if you just look under the microscope, it's not my hand, it's atoms. And then we can look even more closely, King writes. And then to what? Tachyons? Nothing? Of course not. Everything in the universe denies nothing. To suggest an ending is the one absurdity. And we know that this is physics. You keep looking at the atom, and then you can look at the protons and the electrons, and then what? These subatomic particles, and then what makes them up? And so the ideas here are just very intellectually stimulating for us to think about, along with Roland, as we're hearing from the man in black. He talks about the grains of sand in the desert and how each one is a little universe, and Roland walking through, kicking them, just causing destruction and chaos to all of these millions of other worlds than these. King writes, "Yet suppose further, suppose that all worlds, all universes met in a single nexus, a single pylon, a tower, and within it a stairway, perhaps rising to the Godhead itself. Would you dare climb to the top, Gunslinger? Could it be that somewhere above all of endless reality there exists a room? You dare not." And in the Gunslinger's mind, those words echoed. You dare not. Someone has dared, the Gunslinger said. Who would that be? God, the Gunslinger said softly. His eyes gleamed. God has dared. Or the king you spoke of. Or is the room empty, seer? They then talk about who is at the room at the top of the Dark Tower. The nexus of all multiverses represented by a structure, and there's a room at the top, and who is in there? The man in black doesn't know. King writes, I don't know. Fear passed over the man in black's bland face, as soft and dark as a buzzard's wing. And furthermore, I don't ask. It might be unwise. Afraid of being struck dead? Perhaps afraid of an accounting. So the man in black is afraid of having to answer for his crimes. And we're thinking, yeah, Roland, maybe you would be a little nervous too to answer to whomever is at the top of the tower. No answers, though. They don't know. They're just spitballing who's up there. And are you going to go find out? You better not. That seems like a crazy, crazy idea. They keep talking. The night goes on and on and on, this dark night. It's this enchanted night. It's going to keep going on. He's like, now you can ask me anything. This is before they had Instagram. And so Roland's allowed to ask him anything. But he doesn't have great answers. He tells Roland that he doesn't even know this king of the darkness. He's never even seen him before. But Roland must see him. Before he meets this king who's in charge of the tower, allegedly, he's going to meet someone named the Ageless Stranger, and then he has to kill him. He also gives us another biblical beat here, telling us that the name of the king is Legion. And that's a Bible story that I like because it's creepy. That name Legion it's a creepy word, and the idea behind it of a multitude of demons inside of somebody is creepy. So the story is Jesus in the New Testament went to some town, and there was a man who was infested by demons, and the infested demonic person is like, Jesus, don't mess with me. Don't come around because you're going to mess up my life. and Jesus is like, tell me your name, because names hold great power, as we're finding out as we read through and look at the origin of these names. And the demon answers, my name is Legion. And Jesus uses that name to cast out the demon from the man, and he casts them into a herd of swine. And so the pigs become infested with the legion and run down and throw themselves into the river. So it's a super dark, creepy story, and I believe there are at least one horror movie, I think, that has that name. So I like it. My horror bones are kind of peeking up and saying, ooh, this king's name is Legion. Who is that? What kind of a dude is this king of the darkness? He's directly compared to Satan, though, kind of. This evil collection of badness. The man in black tells Roland that he must go to the sea, where he will be he will be invested with the power of drawing. King writes, but that's not exactly right either, the man in black said, pitching his cigarette into the remains of the campfire. No one wants to invest you with the power of any kind, Gunslinger. It is simply in you, And I am compelled to tell you, partly because of the sacrifice of the boy, and partly because it is the law, the natural law of things. Water must run downhill, and you must be told. You will draw 3, I understand. But I don't really care, and I don't really want to know. The 3, the gunslinger murmured, thinking of the oracle. And then the fun begins. But by then I'll be long gone. Goodbye, gunslinger. My part is done now. The chain is still in your hands, where it doesn't wrap itself around your neck. So partly because of the sacrifice of Jake. Really? Did we really need to do that? If it is the law that you must be told, you must be told. This power is in you. Did he have to meet the man in black at all if this power is inside of him? He would have went to the beach anyway. After he came out of the mountains with Jake, they would have went to the beach. And there he will draw 3 because that's what has to happen. That's what's going to happen. We're not sure if the man in black knows what he's talking about here. Did we have to sacrifice Jake? Did we not? Unclear, but if we're believing anything that he says, he will draw 3. But he doesn't know what that means, and he doesn't give a shit. So, not super helpful. But giving him some good advice again at the end here. Beware the chain doesn't wrap itself around your neck. We're already, maybe that horse is out of the barn, but the chains. We walk in love, but fly in chains. Roland des Chain. And I do talk about how that is the way that Stephen King pronounces this name when he reads one of these audiobooks. And I talk about the origin of that name, which is fascinating. And I do believe that it is des Chain after this close read. Roland goes to sleep again, and he wakes up to find himself 10 years older. He's had a very long, long night. He has gray in his black hair now. He sees bones where the man in black was sitting. He's kind of doubtful that this was Walter. He doesn't know. He's like, I don't know if that's really you, but I'll take your jawbone. Whoever this jawbone belongs to, I like to have one of these in my back pocket. So he's got the new jawbone. King writes, he began west again, his back set against the sunrise, heading toward the ocean, realizing that a great passage of his life had come and gone. I loved you, Jake, he said aloud. Well, his back is against the sunrise, headed into the darkness again. Okay, Roland. I loved you, Jake. He never said that when Jake was alive. He's saying it now. Does it change your mind about Roland? I'm going to ask again, how mad are you at Roland at this point? Do you want to know what happens to him next? Can he redeem himself from this awful thing that he has done? Can he still be moving towards the Dark Tower and saving his soul? Man in Black said, turn away and save your soul. Can he do both? A lot of pages to read to find out. And we end this book with the gunslinger reaching the beach, sitting down, watching the waves. King writes, the dark came down and the world moved on. The gunslinger waited for the time of the drawing and dreamed his long dreams of the Dark Tower, to which he would someday come at dusk and approach, winding his horn to do some unimaginable final battle. Oh, I told you I was going to cry, and I didn't cry, but I got very choked up there because the ending of this book, just leaving Roland sitting there after everything that we've been through. It's a lot. It's a good place to end the story. The illustration, if you happen to have an illustrated version of the Gunslinger, is just, it's just beautiful. And that's it for the Gunslinger. We finished. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you kind of like, meh, it was okay? If you loved it, great. You're with me and you're going to keep going. If you were kind of so-so about it or you hated it, stick with me. Stick with me at least for a couple of chapters of the next book. I would argue that the first 3 pages of the next book will probably be enough to get your interest back into the story and into what is to come for Mr. Roland Deschain. I would love to have you along with me for the rest of this reading. I'm going to keep going because I love it so much and I like talking about it so much and I love hearing from you. Thank you so much for being here with me, for listening, for liking these videos, for subscribing, for participating and adding to the conversation. I've really enjoyed it. I'm ready for the next book, which is The Drawing of the Three. And I will have a little intro and reading list video put up. We're going to read the prologue and the first 3 chapters, I believe, is what I'm going to say in that video if you're super eager. Until we meet again for the beginning of The Drawing of the Three, my friends, I wish you long days and pleasant nights.